MAPCD.
Hopefully it doesn't
Lines
come
and
back.
market surveillance.
Hopefully it doesn't come back because it never worked.
He only got booted from his spot both times.
Twice today. But the Evergy took those 3 charging stations out. So those are technically 3 spaces. So they won't put a sticker or a tag on our window if we park there.
Oh, that's good.
It's good to know.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Mike Helpers is going to do a demonstration presentation regarding some functionality regarding on-base in regards to how we run meetings. Now, tomorrow's meeting, Chairman, we have the old light set up down in the boardroom.
It will work.
So you can do it the same way, and we'll still do audible votings tomorrow in order of how you normally vote. What Mike wants to show you here is a potential solution if the commission wants to move forward with a way to do voting on your device at your bench, either laptop or pad, and then vote simultaneously, and it would be broadcast all at once. So you wouldn't vote individually anymore, you would vote in mass, and the clerks would control that to make sure that all of you have voted, and she or he would display it on the screen. And then the other thing I think Mike's going to talk about today is there's a mechanism you can use on your device to alert the chairman when you want to speak. He will demonstrate that. There's a lot of other things, but those are the 2 things we want to talk about today, and maybe some of the other potential. Is that fair, Mike?
Yep.
All right, so with that, we'll let Mike take off.
Great. Good afternoon. Okay. So we're going to talk about this module of software being considered for commission meetings, agenda voting module offered by the On-Base company. We have 3 staff from our application management program here who are the On-Base certified administrators who support all of On-Base and its modules today. Tiffany Crum and Katie Moore are our senior application managers, and Israel Ramos is our application management supervisor. We also have 2 vendor resources on the line, Chuck Duchamp from Highland Technologies and Greg Kober from Konica Minolta. Also in the room is Kelly Arnold and Karen Bailey from the clerk's office, as this new agenda voting module substantially involves the clerk's office staff. So we'll begin with that. You may have heard of On-Base before. It's actually been in use at the county since 1999 and initially implemented for the appraiser's office and for IT as a document imaging solution. Since then, its use has grown into an enterprise imaging solution used by all county departments, mainly for storing paper documents and in a digital format. Many departmental paper processes have gone digital over the last 23 years. And as you can see from the 3rd bullet point here, the number of documents stored has substantially increased. Not only has the usage of document digitalization and storage increased, but the On-Base functionality has been added to several times over the years. Document knowledge transfer, or DKT, allows us to distribute required documents to employees and record it being received, opened, and read. Of course, On-Base is also used heavily for the BOCC meetings agendas. They are stored in OnBase, as are the related documents related to the agenda items. The clerk's office also uses OnBase to store finalized copies of BOCC meeting minutes, as well as all third-party contracts and agreements. Additionally, several departments use OnBase functionality related to reporting dashboards and workflow functionality. There are just many other functionalities in place for the solution as well. The vendor we lean on for support, for OnBase support and projects, is Konica Minolta. We've had our contract in place with them for 11 years now, and we constantly work with them for supporting the solution and expanding it. They're very helpful to us when we address finding efficiencies with current departmental business processes, especially anything which deals with paper or hard copies as part of that process. But as I mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, today we're going to try to give you an understanding of the OnBase voting module and how it might fit within commission meetings. There's a lot of functionality in this module to address several paper-based and non-paper-based processes within a meeting, including commissioners requesting to speak, making motions, seconding motions, casting votes, and even managing public speakers. I'm going to come back to this slide at the end, as I really believe it's likely our main point of discussion for the day. But first, we're just going to show you some screenshots of the application, how it works, what it does, how you would use it. But again, management of this module and how it's used in commission meetings is really more of an application for the clerk's office. Definitely has the potential to change their current business processes the most. But first, here's how it will work. So an OnBase voting client, a small piece of software, would be installed on a county-owned Windows device. This client software is not compatible with Android or iOS, the Apple operating systems. It has to be Windows-based. So each commissioner would be required to have a county-owned laptop or Windows tablet with you at the meetings. The voting client application is touch screen friendly, so a tablet might work well for you, but a normal laptop would work as well. These machines would be on our county network, right? So other software like Outlook, or Office, or Chrome could also be installed. The OnBase software clients talk back to the voting administration machine, which would be sitting in front of and operated by the clerk, or perhaps even two clerks. Once commissioners log on to the voting client, you can pull up the meeting's agenda as seen in the second screenshot here. And as you know, today, the county manager's office uses OnBase for creating and building commission agendas. So if that same agenda that they use is accessed right here. So if they add an off-agenda item at the last minute, you'd see it here. All of the supporting documents which accompany agenda items are also available through this client software. It's kind of hard to see in these screenshots. Let me just walk over here. But these three little dots that you see right here next to each agenda item, that clicking on those brings up a little submenu. And from that submenu, you can request to speak. You can go to the documents that are the supporting documents for the agenda item. When we go back one, you see on each agenda item, you see the three dots out to the right of it. So they're already there in advance. So if we're on agenda item B and you want to speak on agenda item H, you can request that in advance, right? So that when we get to agenda item H, your name would already be there as somebody who wants to speak. And then as this next screenshot shows, that you can also cancel your request to speak at any time. And you can make that request to speak at any time.
You want us to ask questions as we go?
Sure.
So in that case, say I make a request to speak on item H, but we get to item D, and I also want to speak on item D. Can I have two requests up at the same time?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Will it show me what priority they came in?
It would. Let's see. Where am I? More functionality. As public speakers are planned to speak, they can be listed in order and timed at any desired interval. I believe ours is always 5 minutes. This screenshot shows 2, but that can be changed, easily be changed to default to 5 minutes. There's a corresponding display, a TV screen in the room that can put a timer up. As that timer counts down, it can change to yellow when it hits 30 seconds or change to red when it hits 5 seconds or something like that to help manage a speaker's time. The second screenshot here shows how motions can be made and seconded through the software. Again, the agenda voting module has a lot more functionality than just recorded votes. Finally, though, this is what the voting selections look like. It's kind of hard to see, but the options there are yes, no, abstain, and recuse. Those can be worded any way we want, and the colors can obviously be changed. When the voting is opened by the clerks, this is what each commissioner would see, the screenshot on the left. Once all votes are in and the clerk closes the vote, the results are displayed on your client, the screenshot on the right, as well as projected to that TV screen in the room. Now, the city of Wichita uses something similar in their council meetings, and all the displays that come out of it are pumped back to the AV room. So the AV room kind of determines what comes up on the screens in the room, and we think we can do the same thing with this.
So will this show up on the big screen now that we have downstairs?
Right. It doesn't look like that. It looks a little bit different. It's made to look a little prettier, if you will, but yeah.
Is that controlled from the booth? Who's controlling
Yeah.
what's shown?
Yeah, normally
On screen.
the way it's built is it comes out of that clerk's PC and goes straight to the video board, but we believe we can pump that back to the AV room and let them control what goes up on the screen and when it goes up, just as another video feed that they switch through.
Can the commissioners see the voting as it's happening, or is it when it's closed?
No, it'd be closed until the vote is closed and then used by the clerk, and then you'd see the results.
And then if you want to do a change of vote, can you do it at that point?
I assume you can.
I mean, does the software support changing the
Oh,
vote
yeah.
at that point?
Yes.
So go from a yes to a no or whatever.
Yep. And, we've had discussions about what if a commissioner is attending the meeting remotely? Well, they can verbalize their vote through Zoom, through a call or something, and the clerk can report that vote.
Let me make sure technically though, once the clerk sees that all 5 commissioners have voted, they would then send it to the AV room and it's going to get broadcast. I want to make sure I'm understanding the commissioner's question here. He can change his vote up to that point when that gets set, but once it gets set, he can no longer change it, right? It's going to display.
The software is capable of it. That's probably a legal question, is it not? I mean, if a vote is cast and it's finalized and.
I'm not talking about a motion to reconsider. It's a whole other idea,
Okay.
but you mean my legislative perspective. Okay. They'll put up on the board, here's what the vote is. And you might see, maybe someone that you respect voted yes or no. And you might say, maybe there's something about this I don't understand, but that means something to me. Maybe now I see it. I mean, it's a 4-1 vote. I'm the only one that's a 1. I'm on myself. But maybe I don't want to do that. I thought it was going to be a 3-2. I'm surprised by the vote now. Maybe there's a reason why you'd say, okay, at this point, I want to change my vote. Normally in the legislature, they would say, does anybody want to explain their vote? Does anybody want to change their vote? And seeing none,
Okay.
they gavel it. Motion passes 4-1. Once you gavel it, it's locked. Now, if I want to change my vote, I have to make a motion to reconsider, which according to Robert's rules requires a second. And once that's done, you can explain, I have a motion to reconsider. Here's my reasons for wanting to reconsider. Someone seconds that, we're going to do a motion to reconsider. Now we vote on that motion. If it passes, then we can vote on the underlying motion again and do that entire motion again. That's a whole other process. But in this system, I think, because we are used to hearing each other's votes and knowing how people vote, I think the idea is that once you see how your colleagues vote, once you know what's up there, there's reasons why you might want to change a vote. And I think it's just in terms of meeting management, if I was the chairman, I would say, does anybody want to explain their vote? So they want to change their vote. Seeing none, I gavel it, motion passes 5-0, motion fails 2-3 or whatever it is. I think that's a process question, but I think once it's displayed, a commissioner should have a right at that point saying, I'm not comfortable where I'm at right now. I was on the fence. I was kind of leaning this way, but now I'm not so sure. I'm going to go the other way now.
I'm going to lean on
Folks,
my.
this is Chuck with Highland. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, just to chime in on this. So right now, and again, I know the difference between the motions and the votes, but with a motion or a second of a motion, you can withdraw the motion or you can vote on the motion. When it comes to the final vote, the clerk would open the event or the item for voting, the votes would be cast. And at that point, they're kind of done. You would have to have another motion, or you'd have to change it before the vote was finalized. But once those votes are recorded and finalized, that would be it. And I mean, how do you handle that today? Is it just a verbal vote? Like, do you go round robin, or how do you handle it today?
The votes are given verbally in a specific order by each commissioner.
So, I mean, if you replicated that and then just recorded the actual action, that would work as well. But once those votes are locked in, motions can be submitted and withdrawn, but once the votes are locked in, I think technically we might be able to change them, but I think you'd have to revote everybody, not just one person.
Can the display be public while they're voting?
It wouldn't be displayed until the clerk finalizes the vote. And I'll take it as a to-do to ask that question. I've never had that come up before, but I will take that as a to-do, but it won't show on the screen until the clerk finalizes the vote. If you look at the bottom, and I can't see what you all have up there, but in the minutes client where the votes would be recorded, the clerk has the option to say pass or fail, largely because we don't want to have software making that decision. If an item needed a supermajority or a simple majority, we want the clerk to make that decision whether it passes or fails. So until that clerk finalizes it, it would not appear on the voting display in chambers.
Could we see how you vote before it's technically closed? Or is it for us to see it, it's closed?
Correct.
I think the case that Commissioner Howell is presenting would only happen once in a great while, because every one of us are pre-briefed on almost every single item. We know what the agenda is. We look a little over on Fridays. We have a chance in between if we have any questions to ask before Wednesday. The only time that I could see that someone might want to change the vote would be if it's an off-agenda item and we needed more discussion, or if it's an item that take action that the board deems necessary, or that we don't have all the information and we'd have to have it later. I don't see this as a routine whatsoever.
I respectfully disagree. I think there are some things you go into a meeting knowing how you're going to vote. And there's a lot of things that you learn about as it's being presented, or a comment of one of my colleagues convinces me of a thing I hadn't thought about before the meeting. And there's reasons why you go into the meeting and you learn things as you're required to. You don't vote until you vote. And up until that moment, you're formulating your ideology, or you're formulating kind of where you're at on the issue. But you can change your mind at, potentially up until that moment. I guess I see if it's going to work the way it's been described, here's what I think is going to happen. On votes where it's perceived it's not going to be unanimous, it's going to be a little bit more dicey. I can think that maybe it'd be more normal for commissioners to say before we call the vote, I plan to vote no, and here's my reasons why. And I would just let my colleagues know I'm going to be voting no. And here's what I'm thinking. Meanwhile, you're thinking to yourself, well, I was kind of on the fence, but I heard what he just said now, so maybe I'm going to go the other way, or I'm going to go the same way. But he said something to me that means something to me right now. I know how he's going to vote. There may be discussion about how you intend to vote before the vote is called, as a way to get around this problem. I think that ideally, we kind of do that now on some things, but to me, the finality of this vote, when you can't easily change it, it changes the procedures on the bench a little bit. I think I would like to see it changed so that commissioners have opportunities kind of knowing where we're at before we actually call that vote, especially if it's a little bit controversial or difficult. We anticipate a split vote on something. I think there might be more discussion about how people intend to vote before they actually call the vote, potentially.
But when there is controversy and we're not sure, I know I always make it plain, I'm going to vote for or against this before it ever goes to a vote. I think a lot of us do that same thing. Say, I'm going to tell you what my position is and why.
We can look and, leverage the software vendor here to look into if it's a possibility to display that vote to the commissioners before it's finalized.
And go back to my legislative experience, and after they do that, does anybody want to explain their vote? Anybody want to change their vote? if you do change your vote, they put an asterisk in the record that you were a yes, now you're a no, or whatever. It goes into the record, but then you have to say, okay, seeing no more changes, I gavel it, and this is now final. You can still make a motion to reconsider at that point, up until the next day, up through the next day, business day. But, or the next day through the next meeting, whenever that happens to be scheduled. But that's the problem, that's the procedure they use when there's 125 members voting. We only have 5, which is one of the arguments. When you have small boards, roll call voting is fairly normal for small boards. If you only have 3 commissioners or you only have 5 members on a board, roll call voting is fairly normal. When you have 125, the technology becomes more useful. But then they get around that issue with the procedure I just described. Small boards typically, I mean, maybe in the technology we see around us today is more normal now. But I think in history, you've probably seen more voice voting or raise of hands or whatever through smaller boards. Usually that's how it's done, but I guess technology is changing. So,
But I think you're making it more difficult than it has to be. After the vote is done, if there's a question whatsoever, we always have the authority to go back and say, hey, I want to revisit that vote. I don't know that we need all these procedures and changes to software and so forth, because we're flexible. If something comes up, we can adjust on the fly. I don't know that we need different software or that we need set procedures. If someone has a question, bring it up. We'll discuss it and then decide how to vote from there. I think you're making it much more difficult than it needs to be.
well, let me ask you a question then. What is actually the goal of changing this today? What's the mission of this change? What are we trying to do? Because I think this is actually very complicated. If you're just trying to keep track of who wanted to speak first, second, third, those systems are independent and they're out there all over the place. Lots of commissions and councils across this country have a system that does that very easily. As an independent system, keeping track of speaking order and speaking requests of members of the board. If we're trying to keep a public record as to what the motions are and the votes are, we could use our existing system and actually generate that, usually probably on an Excel spreadsheet after the meeting or even during the meeting. Again, that's simple. This is actually quite complicated as a very complicated solution to a problem. I don't quite understand what the problem is.
And I think you're making the solution political rather than what's right for what your vote is. And we all are very informed as we go into this meeting. And to say that, well, because Pete and Sarah and I, we voted one way, and I don't know if I agree with that or not, I'm going to change my vote so that it looks politically like I voted with them. I think that's the wrong way of doing it. We represent 100 and some thousand people, each and every one of us. We ought to be making our vote based on what is right at the time when we make that vote, not on what's politically expedient.
Well, once again, I reject the accusation this is political. Please don't say that, because that's not what this is. So I find that is harsh criticism. It's not unnecessary today.
Well, I can't figure out why you'd want to change the vote after you've seen my vote. There's got to be a reason that you want to change. If you've seen Pete, Sarah's, and my vote to say, I didn't vote that way, so I want to change my vote. What's in your mind that would make you want to change? I can't figure it out. I know what I'm going to vote when I vote. I know that I'm voting based on representing 105,000 people and what's best for 500,000 people in the county.
I've been here a while, and there's been times up until the moment if I have to vote, I've said, you know what? I see reasons to vote for it. I see reasons to vote against it. I'm just kind of torn between what to do here. And if I say, you know what, chairman spoke up and he says he's going to vote no, or so-and-so spoke up and they're going to vote a certain way, that might have influence on my decision. Because maybe I'm really struggling with a particular vote. And that happens. So knowing someone's thought process behind their vote, or what they're going to say about that vote, or them to articulate their intent to vote a certain way, sometimes it has a bearing on other people's votes. It just does. That's why we do this. This discussion is important because it actually might impact the outcome of a particular issue. But to classify this as only political,
I can't.
Saying I'm only doing this because I want to be with you or against you because I want to be like my colleagues or against my colleagues or whatever. That is a harsh criticism. That's not what I'm talking about.
When we have a meeting tomorrow, you're going to be the third person to vote. They're going to call Commissioner Meitzner, they're going to call Commissioner Cruz, and they're going to call Commissioner Howell. So at that point in time, your vote's pretty well locked in. Okay. Then they'll call Commissioner Lopez and Commissioner Dennis. It could go either way, but when, at the time that you vote, because there's still 2 votes behind you. Right. So I've never yet, since I've been 6 years sitting here, seen after you voted third, for you to go back and say, hey, because of the way that, that Commissioner Lopez and Commissioner Dennis voted, I want to change my vote. Yeah, I think we're making a mountain out of a molehill.
Hey, guys, just to jump in here, and I've got to drop off at 3 o'clock Eastern, but I did just hear back from the product manager that indeed the clerk does have the authority to change the vote and re-record that vote after the display happens. So even if you, I'm not quite sure how to display that just to the commissioners, but you would have some availability and some flexibility there. We'd have to work with you to figure out exactly how we'd implement it. But there is some flexibility that even after the vote's finalized to go back and correct it. But
Great,
that's
thank
not
you.
something we normally have heard, so.
So
But to be clear, the reason that we're even presenting this is there was some will among some commissioners to not necessarily know how to vote. They wanted an independent vote. So there's a philosophical discussion here a little bit, was to create a system where commissioners could vote independently without pressure based on how others, if that's not what the commission wants, then we're off base. Then I think we stay doing what we're doing. But that it was intentional to create a system that commissioners wouldn't have the pressure of going into successive order one at a time, that they could all vote independently without knowing what other commissioners would vote.
There are a couple of times that I could see, Jim, your point. One is if we have the motion in our agenda and then it's changed significantly or multiple times, then we're having to think about maybe something a little bit different than what we had originally gone in thinking that we were going to vote one way or the other. So I could see how that could impact us a little bit. And then the other one is if we have a zoning case and it's like in your district, I'm going to really lean in on what you want because it's your district. You should be the one that's really kind of leading that discussion. So I can see both of those times. Maybe there could be some kind of you would maybe want to see, but for the majority, I think this would be.
But we just learned that the clerk can change it. And as I said before, we've got flexibility. If a commissioner brings up, hey, I'd like to rediscuss this. And we've got flexibility, we can revote. We just found that out. So is there a problem with that?
I'm just making the point that you say I'm making this complicated. I think it's complicated. What's being presented today is complicated. And we're solving a problem. I'm not quite sure what the problem actually is. If the problem is that we know that I'm always gonna be the third voter because of the way we do this. I've only been the last voter 1 year out of my 8 years of being here, okay? I've been the third voter for 7 years, okay? I think maybe we should randomize the order of voting. That might be something we should talk about and talk. But this is a fairly simple problem versus a very complex, I'm going to say probably fairly expensive and a fairly large impact on the clerk's office solution to a problem. I'm not quite sure what the problem actually is. So anyway, if you want to have anonymous voting and that's the key, then this is a fairly complex way of doing that.
So I have just a little bit more information on this in this presentation that addresses exactly that, because we realize this is a ton of technology to introduce into a commission meeting. And the last thing we want to do is become disruptive, right, to how the meetings flow. So our plan is to take kind of a phased approach to this and to implement just a little bit at a time. We plan to start with the request to speak and the voting functionality. And wait until that is comfortable, till the clerks are comfortable with it, till the commission is comfortable with it before we look at expanding to anything else. Because of exactly what you're saying, because I've been in meetings where somebody makes a motion, then that motion gets withdrawn, or it gets changed, or it gets, reworded, or legal pipes in and adds some wording to it. Those kind of things that are just ad hoc or ad lib like that, it's going to add some time for the clerk to type that into the software. Things that are straightforward votes that are built into the agenda, those will be preloaded in, right? The approval of previous meetings minutes or something like this that is straightforward. Those will be without any problem, I don't think. But if the things are on the fly, and we've talked about this, Karen and Kelly have also been in on these demonstrations that we've had with Conica Minolta, and they realize that it's a big change for them, potentially a big change for them and how they run these meetings. But it also has a lot of potential to take some of their very manual processes today and make them much, much more efficient. Specifically, the way they record minutes afterwards, after the fact. Very manual, very takes a lot of time for them to do it. And with this edition and with some other things that we're looking at, some Dragon software for voice to text recognition, we think we can, make those processes much more efficient.
Now, when we go to vote, a lot of times like minutes, we might have 3 sets of minutes. We take them all as one vote. Will this thing allow us to take all those as one vote without the clerk going through, clicking on each one and calling it up?
That's a good question.
It's a good question. They may be able to answer that, but I would think we would have to sit there and do it 3 times in a row.
If it's pre-staged.
If you group 2 or 3 agenda, this is for the people online, but if you group 2 or 3 votes into one vote, or items, let me phrase that, items into one vote.
I think you'd have to put them all as one agenda.
And
Approval of the
now,
county commission meeting minutes of October 5th, of October 12th, and of October 19th. Have them all listed on one item if you just wanted one vote.
and it's the same with like appointments and so forth. Boone will say you can take items D, E, and F all together. So we will D, E, and F all together. So you're saying we're gonna have to do
In the
D,
software, they're
E.
listed as individual items and the vote would have to come in order to go into the record.
Individually, yeah.
What about having multiple motions on a single agenda item? And I don't mean substitutes, I'm saying a motion, we vote, we have another motion for something else related to that agenda item. You vote, can you have multiple motions on the same agenda item?
You can. They can be added at any time. Again, that's going to take a little bit of time, right, for the clerk to type in those motions. But
That's the meeting right there.
anything that's, laid out for as part of an agenda beforehand will be there when that agenda item comes up. But if you're adding stuff just as we go, then they would have to type it in.
Can I type a motion and send it to her somehow so she can just, she has to physically type, he or she.
But like
Yeah,
bid
you
board,
could, because
We
we
might-
could open up the menu.
we might take a bid board and say, we're gonna approve items 1, 3, and 5 on the bid board. We take a motion of that, and then we go back and say, well, let's talk about, we'll defer 2 and we'll approve 4 or something.
To make that more.
We break those up quite frequently.
Right.
So, and what about consent? Can we pull like B and?
Yeah.
You can do it all. Yes, you can do it all today. You can do everything with software that you can do today with regards to changing motions and excluding items from a motion or this type of thing. It's just going to take some time working through.
On that point, I think we need to find out from them if, like you said, the agenda item usually could have 15, 20 items in it.
Right.
Can we still vote on those as one consent agenda item, or do we have to go into the machine and
I would
hit
think
yes on every single?
That is
No.
the case.
You could,
We believe, yeah.
According to,
okay,
Yeah.
clarify, what do you believe is the case?
well, they vote, you voted all the time.
That in one.
Yes.
And if you don't accept the canned motion as presented on the agenda, you want to change it to, I approve the consent agenda except for item L, then we would just have to type in your motion the way you stated, and you'd want to see that before you took your vote. So the clerk is doing that live during the meeting. That's on the forward software, not right now.
Cheyenne's leaving, you got somebody that can do all this.
We don't have a board clerk. Thank you for recognizing that.
Oh,
Right now, it's gonna be the supervisor. It's hard to hire somebody at the wages that we have. Sorry, that's the real truth.
So we are at a stage where we're ready to move forward with procurement. We're not going to do that, right? Until you all are comfortable with it. The clerk's office is comfortable with it, but we were asked to look into this about 2 or 3 months ago, and we've been working for 2 or 3 months to put all this together. And then Friday, Nicole and I discovered that this meeting had been canceled for 9 o'clock this morning. So
there any way that we can mock this thing one time for the commissioners can sit down?
We would definitely want to do that.
And we can mock it up and go through some practice sessions and try the different perturbations of how we might vote.
we can look into that. Not easily, right? Which is why I had screenshots today instead of actually doing a demo for you. But we can work with Concom Milta and see.
Before we go live downstairs, it'd be nice if we practice and mock it up.
Sure.
Try and take motions and change them around and combine things.
Part of the engagement was training.
Yeah, we haven't had any training and now not having a clerk. You know, we're hoping that this gets staged in a little slower so that we can have someone on staff that would just join right in with the training. It'll be the accepted practice for them. They won't be learning something new.
Well, we should probably wait to vote on it until we have. A full new commission anyways, because they're gonna be. Who's gonna be using it, so.
And there's no sense trying to retrain everybody.
Are you all using electronic paperwork now or is someone still using paper? Are you willing to look into going electronic?
That's where I
Do you
There's
not
pros and
want
cons of
to-
it. I mean, again, having paper, I can write, I can highlight things and circle things and make notes on the margins, and the paper is the way I think. I understand saving trees, okay, I get that, but the technology on a screen cannot replace what I have on paper. It just can't happen.
I believe their software also enables notes.
I have a tablet, I know how that works, I'm
Okay.
familiar with it. That, again, it doesn't
So
replace
it's
what I
the
have on
same
paper.
for you.
You mentioned procurement. Do we have a cost as to what this is gonna cost?
We do. It's just that, though, it's an estimate. There are a lot of variables into that, like there's a $2,000 range for implementation. Low to high is $2,000. And then there's a annual cost that we have that we kind of negotiated. We're still kind of negotiating.
That's important.
I guess I'd like to know more information about the
Sure.
cost of
Be
this.
happy
You know,
to share
I see we're solving a problem.
I have that
It
proposal
doesn't
right here.
necessarily need to be solved, but we're gonna solve it this way. There's gonna be a cost. I'd like to know what that cost is going to be. Okay. And then you mentioned someone asked you several months ago, did that come from the commission or from management, or how'd that happen?
Manager's office.
Comments. So it's been hard to get a comment in. I've got a meeting I've got to get to. And so I gotta leave in 5 minutes, but I am for this. I think whenever a person votes, they vote on the merit of the item. And they have all the input they have and shouldn't be, I'm not influenced by, I'm not counting votes to say, well, I could be against this now because it's gonna pass anyway. I could be for it now because it's not gonna pass, blah, blah, blah. I think it's the merits of the agenda item. And it worked that way at the city. If anything wanted to avoid this, maybe we all just fill out the paper, yes or no. Hand the paper in and the clerk can reveal it at that. But that's where I'm at. If everybody doesn't want to do that, then it's the will of the commission. I'm for it. And I'm ready to move on, especially if the cost isn't all that much. So I think it's really an efficient way and an honest way to cast votes on agenda items. So
But we do need to know the cost. I mean, we got to balance that against what the outcome's going to be. We're also going to have to work with the clerk's office pretty closely because this is going to have more of an impact on the clerk than it's going to have on the private level.
I'm happy to share the estimate with you. This might be, we don't know. I've been told it won't be, but it might be subject to competitive bid. So I don't really want to give out one vendor's price publicly because then others would be able to bid and undercut that. But I'm happy to share this.
Any questions?
No, I not no specific questions. This is just something that, depending on how, he talked about these two agenda items. There's additional things that can be done. We've been given demonstrations on more components. It does significantly change how our office operates, not just at the meetings, but leading up to the meetings and post meetings in the items, the work that goes into it. Talked a little bit about the minutes. one of my concerns is during the meeting, whether or not I'll have a second clerk there, because like when we talk about doing motions, sometimes this commission likes to do a substitute motion and then a substitute motion and a dying and flack of a second and then another substitute motion, all in the same agenda item. We have to type in all that at each motion, review it, let you guys review to make sure this is the motion that's being made and it's correct. Then, go to a vote or not, or if there's a substitute motion, then back that all out, put in your substitute. So it's a lot for one person sitting there to try to pay attention to typing that, clicking all the buttons for yeses and nos, getting to the next agenda items on there, and at the same time, paying attention to you and the commission as the meeting flows. So there's definitely extensive work that we're going to have to look at doing this, depending on as we implement this thing in different components as well. One of the concerns that I had, I think we got clarification on, is on the speaking. Initially, it came across as if a commissioner wanted to speak, they would click their button, the clerk would get that information. And we'd have to share it with the chairman to say, Commissioner Howell wants to speak on this agenda item. There is is it a separate window that the chairman can see those as well? We believe there's a second window
that current items
for
three tabs across the top of that voting client.
you would kind of have to go
Any
look
request to speak,
Yeah.
shows up there.
to do that. So it may be a little bit different for those requests to speak. My concern was I didn't want my clerk to have any responsibility or be in charge of anything that dealt with what should be a chairman's role of, saying who gets to speak or who wants to speak, or, call it of the vote and that kind of thing. We wanted to make sure that stays in the chairman's hands and not in the clerk's hands. So
Some areas, at least if I understood what Mike was telling us, that if you're using Dragon and so forth, you're able to prepare the minutes a lot easier.
So this is a whole separate discussion for another time, but right now what we do is we get the closed captioning from KPTS, which is just a text document dump. We have that recorder, so we have that just a long text, let me put it that way, I'll say a few other words, well, nice. And listen to it and try to break up that sentence. There's other systems out there that is a lot more, we take a lot of that work out of that, where it'd be broken into sentences and that kind of thing. We know the sheriff's office uses Dragon. We're going to maybe take a look at that, see if that's an option. I know we pay KPTS.
We pay them for the closed caption,
Per
but it's
hour.
not a very clean
Yeah,
price.
and it's a per hour thing. And so it's kind of like, what is the cost of that versus what is the cost of some potential other options out there? They can make our clerks work.
Can we pay KPTS to get us back to closed caption?
Correct.
No, you pay them for the
But,
closed
yes.
captioning. We're able to get that file from them.
Yes.
Well, I know
It's
we're
not
paying,
just for us.
they,
yeah.
Since we moved over here, we're now having to pay for their ability to transcribe it for closed captioning. But we're not paying for it twice already.
No, you don't pay for it twice. It's
Twice.
one file of closed captioning that you have to do for your meet anyway. Because you need to have that on there for the folks that can't hear.
That's something we have been talking a little bit alongside of this thing. So
Carol, did you have anything else?
No, not
No.
really. I mean, there's a lot, but it's being phased in, so we're a little more comfortable with that.
Anything else, Joe? Mr. Manager?
That's it.
That's it. All right, thanks for the update.
Thank you.
Flexibility, to keep air power. I've heard that airport.